Agenda item 2 right now, we're reviewing just basics and some of the housekeeping work. So we're going to do that next. And the biggest part of tonight, quite frankly, is going to be getting out and touring. So we're just going to go on a walking tour. We're going to pop into, I'll say every room, it may not be, but we're going to get into spaces you haven't seen before. And team members are going to describe challenges they see in the building, and Lenny will lead and talk about spaces that are working well, some that aren't potentially working so well. And again, the goal is to just give you a first-hand look and sense if you haven't been through the building before. And I have a feeling some over here have been through every inch of the building, and they'll probably be valuable tour guides as we go along.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
One of the last meeting is April 23rd. It's a Sunday. I think it's supposed to be the 25th.
Okay. Good catch.
Or 26th, maybe.
We'll take a look. Thank you.
And maybe 26th.
Is that right?
April 23rd.
Well, there's 2 weeks. There's not 2 weeks between the 11th and the 23rd. That's 12 days. So there's
April 25, yeah.
25.
Okay. I thought you said you weren't any good at math. Yeah. You're really good at math. Look at that. Yeah, we'll check that and we'll get that cleaned up. Thank you.
Front page is 1, 2. I think it's probably Monday, November 13th. If it goes from the 8th to the 13th.
Yeah, no. 15th probably.
School board meeting would
It's
be.
either a Wednesday or it's
Are
Monday.
they always on Wednesdays?
So, yes. So I think, yeah, you're right. So the board meetings, so there's going to be some board check-ins. Those will be on their regular board meeting nights.
That's Monday.
Yep.
That is Monday.
Oh, that is a Monday.
Thank
Okay,
you.
So that'd be Monday.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Good catch. We'll get those cleaned up and we'll bring the new ones for the next meeting. All right, so the other piece we wanted to do is give you some floor plans and site plans. Tab 5 has a site plan. So as you can see, we obviously have site. We'll talk a little bit about how that's working, traffic flow, things like that as we move forward. Playground space, parking, that type of thing. But for tonight, you may want, as we're walking, to bring this plan along. It's obviously the existing floor plan. With the number of engineers and architects we have on the committee, this will be easier to read for some than others. But feel free to take it along, take notes, thoughts, because when we come back together as a group, we're going to spend some time just documenting your general observations as we work through the building. So that's a document for you to use moving forward. Tab 6 has included within it a number of items, and we're not going to go through these in detail. A bit of this is for you to use in your own time between now and the next meeting and see if it triggers any questions. But what we find fascinating is the building evolution diagram. People always ask, how old is the building? Which section of the school are we in? And we think this is kind of a great way graphically to show that the building has been added to 7 times, starting in 1915. So the original section of the school, right up at the corner on 60, it was constructed in 1915. With a number, as you can see, a series of additions. This doesn't even take into account renovations that have occurred within the building over time. That just gets to be too complex when you layer that on top of this. So these are just major phases of construction additions dating back to 1915. And so you'll see that as we go through. There's corridors that seem like they're maybe not necessary, or why would they be there? They're often code-driven, and they were dictated by an addition at one point in time dating back to 1915. The other thing I will say is we don't have great information on this other than existing building plans. So if any of you in the room are better historians and said, I was here in 2000 and that was not completed, that would be helpful. And so let us know if you see things that don't seem right here, because all we do have to work from is building plans, and the dates on the plans are not always in alignment with when the projects were completed. So if you see anything there, let us know. But again, it's interesting to know how many different pieces and phases that this building has gone through. The next couple sections are the early phase of a needs assessment from an infrastructure perspective. So at the next meeting, we will be bringing plumbing, HVAC, and electrical reports for the building. So you'll get a chance to see from an engineer's perspective. They did walkthroughs of the school. They looked at electrical panels, water services, all those things that go into a building that may not be apparent to us typical lay people as we're walking through schools, but it'll give you a sense of things they're noting as being areas of need. They don't do destructive demolition to determine types of piping and age of piping and all that. So there'll be some conceptual needs that they know are traditional of a building of this vintage, or this, I have 8 vintages, I guess we could call it. But you'll find that to be interesting, and again, we're going to keep documenting this for you. The other pieces, excuse me, that are included tonight are the beginning looks at some infrastructure and maintenance needs. So you'll see on the page labeled 16 in your book, those numbers and letters correspond to the plans on the next pages. So these are just some very quick architectural observations from our team as they walk and tour the buildings. So for example, item 1E, there's dated carpeting, worn, rippled, and stained. So when you see a 1E on the plan, that'll identify a room that may be in need of some carpeting. And again, these are quick observations. They're not all encompassing. The other thing I would generally say is most of the things that you're going to see in both the engineer reports and these documents, none of this is due to neglect. None of this is due to an intentional lack of maintenance. Almost everything that we find in here is just due to age. When we talk, and this will kind of go for every building as we're touring and all the reports, and we talk about something not being to code, it's not that it isn't, it is to code for the era or the age that it was constructed. It just doesn't meet today's codes. That doesn't mean you have to run out and repair it immediately, but the suggestion is if a major project is undertaken, if we remodel, if we do some work, we have to be cognizant that some of those areas that are not in compliance with today's code will need to be brought up to code. The other piece I'll say is they're going to sneak a new code in on us at some point here, January 1st. I don't know if you've heard any more, but we think it's right somewhere around the beginning of the year. But they love to have a new code but not tell you exactly what's going to be in it until right up to the end. So some of this may change. We'll let you know if there's a, yeah.
Who is they?
The state of Wisconsin.
Oh.
So they're adopting a code, and they adopt a code and then they write, I'll exaggerate, 2,000 pages of ways they're going to change the code that they adopted. So we're used to it, and we've got team members that are ready to go once they get that out, and we've been going to all the seminars, but that's a piece of the puzzle that we'll have more clarity on in the near future. So that's the needs assessment piece from the infrastructure building envelope perspective. Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, is another big piece of the puzzle when we're talking about buildings, especially buildings of this type. So similar to the prior document, all the descriptions on these 2 pages have a coding system, so 1A, 2A, 3A, etc. You can see on the next plan, the plan page number 20, those all correspond to a component of the building of varying types and complexity that do not comply with ADA code. Just like before, these were built to code when they were constructed. But these would be areas of improvement if we as a group and eventually the board decide to make an investment in this school. The ADA improvements would be a component that we would likely be triggered to make an investment in. So it's just giving you a sense of areas of need there. The next page is page 21 in the document. This is not complete. It's really showing you that there are 16 different roof sections on the building. So what we're going to do is we're working with Dave to document exactly the general age of all of these sections of roof and ones that are in area need, unless you have a sense off the top of your head.
Give you all of them.
Yeah, so we have this, it just isn't completed at this point. So we'll bring you a new document that'll help you understand kind of age of roofing. Again, we try to do that. There's long reports that people write about roofing. We try to turn it into a picture for architects. I think it's a little easier to communicate. But the hope would be you can just get a sense of general condition of roof. So that'll be something we're going to talk about moving forward. The next piece is doors. So there's a lot of different door types. So these are exterior doors only. So in general, you'll see there's 10 doors around the exterior of the building. What we do is we list the door type and the frame type. At this point, we haven't gone ahead and rated those doors or made a condition. This is a great example since we're sitting in a room. That's a hollow metal door frame that you see there. And if you see the bottom, it's kind of rusting out and starting to deteriorate. See it there, and we'll find some others as we walk. Actually, this is an aluminum frame, my apologies. This is just a steel insert. So this is a good example. This is an aluminum frame. This is a good type of door, I would say. So this is a door that when they throw salt on the exterior in the winter months and it sits up against the door frame, it's not corroding at the metal. I think In general, hollow metal doors, and again, these are extremely common when the building was built. They're still used somewhat routinely, but if we're looking at a major investment and the goal is to get more longevity, we may want to have the discussion around replacing hollow metal doors that are rusting out and deteriorating with something more similar to this assembly, which is an aluminum door frame. And then the final page within the book is helping you understand what types of flooring we have in the school. This doesn't rate, and the reason we don't go through and rate flooring and things like that, it's arbitrary. You may walk through and say, I think that flooring's okay. We may walk through and say that flooring's poor. So we don't want to create an impression that there's an area of need. We're going to work with you to decide if there are needs. But what you'll note here is VCT is the type of flooring that we're in, so it's vinyl composition tile. This type of flooring is probably the most prevalent in K-12 schools, in any building, a public building type. It requires stripping and waxing on a regular basis. So every summer if you come in and they've got all the furniture piled out of a classroom and they're stripping and waxing, it's likely that it's VCT. Again, good flooring, it's just labor intensive from the perspective of maintenance and ongoing operations. Otherwise, you see there's a lot of carpeting in the school. We'll talk a little bit later in the process about different types of carpeting. This is not what I would say is kind of a modern carpeting that's designed for humid climates or our younger learners. There are more modern carpets that can surely handle that type of environment better than this. And then there's a little bit of what's called ACT, I think, wasn't there?
In the front hall of
Yeah,
1950.
that's right. So there's a little bit of asbestos tile. Nothing to be terribly concerned about. Asbestos tile was, other than the medical challenges when it's removed and you inhale it, it's a durable floor. It lasts forever if it's well maintained. And it's not any harm or concern for students, but it's a consideration moving forward. If we're to stay here, the goal would be to get the asbestos out of the building and get more modern floorings back in its place. So again, the goal is to give you an overall sense, and we're going to continue to do this in more detail as we move forward through the process. All the different components that go into a school and go into a building for your consideration.